The Mongols were known for unleashing a series of unrelenting horrors upon the Islamic world, from the catastrophic destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire to the sack of Baghdad. No shortage of Islamic authors over the 13th century called the Mongols a punishment sent by God for their sins. Yet, many of the Mongols in the west of the empire before the end of the 13th century converted to Islam, and in time some of the heirs of Genghis Khan held the Sharia over the Yasa. In today's episode of our series on the Mongols, we explore why so many Mongols chose to convert to Islam. The Mongols might have been religiously tolerant when it suited them. The Mongolians' interaction with Islam began in the 12th century, as Islamic merchants brought valued goods, such as textiles or metal tools, in exchange for furs and animals. At least two Muslims, Hassan and Jafar Khoja, were among Genghis Khan's close allies during his escape to Lake Balgina, where they swore loyalty to him. As Genghis Khan expanded the Mongol Empire, initially Muslims found little reason to lament it. Muslim merchants continued to serve in prominent roles, acting as emissaries and spies on behalf of the Khan, who rewarded them and encouraged them to make the difficult journey to Mongolia. When Genghis Khan's great general, Jebe Noyan, entered the Tarim Basin in 1218, pursuing their fleeing foe, Kuchlug, he proclaimed that all those who willingly submitted were free to worship as they chose. The region swiftly threw out Kuchlug's garrisons and accepted Mongol rule, not as conquerors but liberators. The next stage of Mongol expansion was not so well received. The highly destructive conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire resulted in the deaths of millions across what is now Uzbekistan, through eastern Iran and Afghanistan. Though most of Iran submitted peacefully to the Mongol Noyan Chomukan over the 1230s, with the arrival of Hulagu in the 1250s, a new wave of massacres was unleashed, culminating in the sack of Baghdad in 1258 and the death of the Abbasid Caliph, an immense blow to the psyche of the Ummah. At the end of the 1250s, it seemed that soon the whole Muslim world would become the subject of the Great Khan. The initial period after the Mongol conquest was for many Muslims not easier. Claims of Mongol religious toleration have been greatly over-exaggerated and colored by our modern perception of the term. While it is true that the Mongols generally did not persecute on the basis of religion, the Mongols did persecute specific beliefs they saw as contrary to steppe custom and the laws of Genghis Khan, the Great Yasa. These infractions, such as halal slaughter or washing of dirty things in running water, resulted in Mongol oppression. Both Genghis Khan's son Chagatai in the 1230s and Kublai Khan in the 1280s forbade halal slaughter on pain of death. A Khwarezmian refugee to the Delhi Sultanate, writing around 1260, Juzjani, wrote of his sincere belief that Chagatai and other members of the Mongol leadership intended a genocide of the Muslims. Why did Islam succeed in converting the Mongols of Western Asia after such a low point? It was a matter of proximity. The majority of the population in the major centers in the Golden Horde, Ilkhanate and Chagatai Khanate were Muslims, ensuring that not only could Sufis and others proselytize to the Mongol leadership, but also their military. Efforts by Buddhists or various Christian representatives, be they Catholic, Syriac or Nestorian, lacked comparable resources, and their efforts were generally restricted to attempting to convert the highest-ranking Mongols. While this brought them some influence, in contrast to the image in most historical narrative sources, monarchs tended to convert once enough of their followers had done so for it to be a sound decision for their legitimacy. More Mongols simply had closer proximity to Muslim populations than they ever did Christian or Buddhist, leading to a more thorough conversion than any Franciscan friar could ever accomplish. Similar proximity prompted the slow Sinicization of the Mongols in Yuan, China. The Mongols also found Muslims very useful. Islamic craftsmen, administrators and healers were quickly spread across the Mongol Empire, accompanying every Khan and Noyan on campaigns and in their camps. In short order, they commanded armies, often of their own locally raised forces, to fight for the Khans. The various Islamic peoples of Central Asia, be they Turkic or Iranic, provided a plethora of skills and manpower the Mongols lacked. By the reign of Ogedai, Muslims were many of the highest-ranking members of the bureaucracy. Mahmud Yelovach, his son Masud Beg, and Abd al-Rahman served as heads of the branch secretariats the Mongols established to govern Central Asia and China. These men were answerable only to the Great Khan. The presence of many Islamic jurists in Chinggisid courts is well attested, and a merchant with fiscal ability could be richly rewarded in lucrative ortog arrangements with the Mongol princes. The Mongols' search for skills they saw as useful particularly rewarded Muslims with aptitude in alchemy and astrology. The Khans of the Ilkhanate spent considerable sums on alchemists who claimed to be able to produce gold or prolong life, much to the chagrin of the Ilkhanate's viziers. Astrologists who could determine the future also received great rewards, for the Mongols put great stock in this. The duties of Mongol shamans fell to influencing events within the current life, rather than with the next level of existence. Thus, for the Mongols, it was useful to accumulate holy men to interact with the supernatural beyond what their own shamans could. It also explains why, once they did convert, the Mongols continued to commune with shamans, which makes it difficult for many to accept their conversions as sincere. As historians like Devin DeWeese or Peter Jackson have argued, though, we cannot gauge the authenticity of any Mongol conversion from our vantage point centuries later, as the nature of our sources leaves us unable to determine the conviction of each convert. The Mongols actively selected aspects of sedentary societies which benefited themselves, and therefore could choose to profess Islam while continually observing shamanic practices and standard cultural actions. The conversions of the Mongols and their servants began in the 1240s. One of the first prominent figures to convert was not a Mongol, but a Uyghur named Korguz, Ogedai's appointment to the head of the Secretariat of Western Asia. One of the most powerful officials in the empire, Korguz's conversion from Buddhism to Islam at the start of the 1240s marked the highest profile convert yet in the Mongol government. According to Giovanni, Batu, while preparing for the confrontation with the Hungarians at Mohi in 1241, ascended a hill to pray to eternal blue heaven, and asked the Muslims in his army to pray for victory as well. It is unclear if they were Muslim troops raised from Central Asia and the steppe, or Mongol converts. One of the main units in Mongol expansion and consolidation was the Tama, a garrison force permanently stationed in a region made up of nomadic and sedentary troops. The Mongols in a Tama were forbidden to bring their families with them. Separated from their homeland, families and shamans, and taking new wives, who were generally Muslims, these Mongols were thus removed from the infrastructure that encouraged the maintenance of their traditional religion and made them more susceptible to conversion. This can be best observed in the case of Tamchi Baiju, stationed in the Caucasus and Anatolia from the early 1240s until the 1260s. Over roughly 20 years, he appears in a variety of historical accounts which demonstrate not only the presence of many Muslims in his camp, as advisors, administrators and Sufis, but also the gradual conversion of his men. By the end of his life, Baiju became a Muslim and asked to be washed and buried in Muslim fashion on his death. Perhaps the most famous convert was Burqa Khan, known for his war against his cousin Hulagu over the Caucasus. Conflicting accounts are given for his conversion. Either he was raised a Muslim or converted in the 1240s through the efforts of the Sufi Sheikh Saif al-Din Bakazi. Certainly by the 1250s, Burqa was a Muslim, as multiple independent sources attest to his adherence, though Mamluk embassies indicate that Burqa continued to dress and wear his hair in the distinctive Mongolian style, rather than don Islamic clothing. While Berke's war with Hulagu is often portrayed as his anger over the death of the Caliph, it seems this was a secondary concern to him. His own letters to Sultan Baybars blame the conflict on Hulagu's infringement of the Yassa by failing to send Berke loot from Baghdad and Iraq or consult with him. The fact that war began 3 years after Baghdad's fall, and that Hulagu occupied Jochid territory in northern Iran and the Caucasus after Monggol's death, suggests that Berke's immediate concerns were more strategic than spiritual. Islam, for the early converts like Berke, was not a change of identity, but an acceptance alongside their existing beliefs and incorporated into a Chinggisid worldview. Almost certainly, Berke, like his Islamic successors, continued to consult with shamans and the Yassa, yet never felt disloyal to the Sharia. While Berke's conversion was accompanied by some of his brothers and commanders, there was no immediate Islamization of the emerging Golden Horde. Only at the start of the 1280s did both westernmost Khanates of the Mongol Empire have Muslim rulers, Turdammunka in the Golden Horde and Tegida in the Ilkhanate. Once more, the sources hint that sheikhs and Sufis were behind the conversion of both men, and continued to be held in great esteem in their courts. For the Ilkhan Tegida, who upon his enthronement went by the name of Sultan Ahmad, we have a variety of sources that describe his commitment to Islam, which vary widely and demonstrate why many doubt the authenticity of the early conversions. In a letter Tegida sent to the Mamluk Sultan Kalawan, Tegida spoke of establishing Sharia law in the Ilkhanate, and that their shared religion made it easier for the Mamluks to submit to him. Sicilian Armenian writers like Hetem of Coricus and Stepanos Obelian generally portray Tegida as a persecutor of Christians. Yet at the same time, the Syriac churchman Bar Hebraeus wrote of Tegida as a friend to Christians, an upholder of religious toleration who exempted them from taxation and allowed Hebraeus to build a new church, while the Mamluks were largely skeptical of his conversion. Taking the throne in 1295, the Ilkhan Ghazan portrayed himself as the first true Muslim Ilkhan. For this reason, the Islam of his two predecessors, Tegida and Baidu, was denigrated in official accounts from his reign, predominantly the great work of his vizier Rashid al-Din. Ghazan only came to Islam a few weeks before his enthronement, urged to convert by his commander, Noruz Noyan, and the Sheikh, Sadr al-Din al-Hamiwayi, during his rebellion against Ilkhan Baidu. While his biographer, Rashid al-Din, portrays Ghazan's conversion as causing his commanders and soldiers to follow suit, it seems almost certain that it was in fact the opposite, and that by converting, Ghazan hoped to gain the wavering support of Baidu's Muslim followers, which quickly happened. Upon becoming Ilkhan, on the instigation of his zealous general Noruz, Ghazan ordered the destruction of Christian, Jewish, Buddhist and Zoroastrian centers in Muslim cities in his empire, and imposed the jizya. However, these harsh measures were quickly rescinded with Noruz's downfall in 1297, though Buddhists did not return to the prominence they had previously enjoyed. Ghazan, before the end of the 1290s, donned a turban and even declared jihad against the Mamluks. Yet his efforts did not convince everyone. Outside of Damascus in 1300, the great Mamluk jurist Ibn Taymiyyah accused both Ghazan and his vizier, the Jewish convert to Islam, Rashid al-Din, of being false Muslims, and that Ghazan continued to worship Chinggis Khan in place of Sharia. The life of Ghazan's brother and successor, Uljitu, is the most extreme example of a Mongol prince's flexible approach to religion. His father Arghun had the young Uljitu baptized a Nestorian Christian and given the name of Nicholas. As a teen, he converted to Buddhism, taking the name of Uljitu. Under the influence of a wife, he converted to Sunni Islam and became Muhammad Kudabanda. First attached to the Sunni school of Hanafism, then to Shafi'ism, frustration with fighting between them drove him back to Buddhism before in 1309 choosing Shia Islam. a number of sources offer explanations for what drove Olcaytu to become a Shia, generally focusing on how advisors, scholars, and emirs in his court convinced him of its merits. In some accounts, Olcaytu converted back to Sunni Islam shortly before his death in 1316. Following Ghazan's reign, the Ilkhanate is considered an Islamic state, with the majority of its army and upper echelons Muslim. The process was slower in the Golden Horde and Chagatai Khanate. In the Golden Horde, it took until the reign of Özbek Khan, who seems to have converted shortly after his accession, to gain the support of influential Noyans within the Horde. In legendary accounts, Özbek was converted by a Sufi named Baba Turkles, who proved the veracity of his religion by passing unscathed through an oven, wearing nothing but chainmail, while the shaman he challenged was burnt to death. However, Baba Turkles does not appear in sources until centuries after Özbek's death, though likely he was influenced by Sufis and jurists in his entourage. To cement his reign and religion, Özbek ordered the executions of over 100 Chinggisid princes and Noyans, larger than purges carried out by other prominent converts, such as Ghazan in the Ilkhanate and Tughluq Timur in the eastern Chagatai Khanate. Özbek's violent efforts succeeded in permanently making the Jochids Muslims. Still, in policy, Özbek, Ghazan, and Olcaytu largely matched their forebears in providing taxation exemptions, favors, and other privileges to Christians, especially Franciscan missionaries, though on a lesser scale than earlier in the 13th century. Their successors, Özbek's son Janibeg and Olcaytu's son Abu Said, proved less welcoming, as even Christians found their privileges revoked. Janibeg ordered his men to dress in the fashion of Muslims, while Abu Said sought to become the protector of the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, one year even sending an elephant there for inexplicable reasons. Still, these monarchs showed themselves to continue in their traditions, such as acts of levirate marriage, marrying their father's wives, something forbidden by their new religion. Islam proved an aspect of these monarchs' identities, but it took many generations in Iran for all elements of Mongol culture and Chinggisid ideology to be driven out, and in the steppes, the process, it can be argued, never fully replaced the memory of the house of Chinggis Khan.